I pay for things that I didn't do and my ancestors didn't even do. My ancestors came over from Germany like 4 generations ago. I'm about as German as they can be being born in America. Why should I pay for stuff that I didn't do and my ancestors didn't do, and my money go to people who probably didn't endure slavery or probably didn't even have ancestors that endured slavery, let alone ever endure slavery themselves? And how much do you want to bet that if this bill is passed, probably less than 5% of that money would actually end up where it's supposed to be? The rest would disappear. It would go unaccounted for. Congress would have nice big fat bonuses they vote for themselves to get at the end of the year, of course. But how much do you want to bet that it's just another tax fraud and scam? It's from a Democrat, of course it is. But I'm tired of hearing about slavery and racism every day on the internet or in person. I hear one person and one institution blamed. I hear white people and America blamed for slavery over and over and over and over again. Over and over and over and over again. America gets blamed for slavery. America did not start the transatlantic slave trade. Okay? We didn't. We didn't start the transatlantic slave trade. Actually, Portugal and the British started it. And it was Portugal started in the very beginning. The British latched on quick. And they started that in 1619. America didn't officially exist until 1783. It was not recognized as a country until the end of the Revolutionary War. Because think about this: if we were fighting the Revolutionary War, until we win it, we're not actually a free country yet. We didn't become recognized as a country until the war ended in 1783. And now there's arguments. There's arguments over when America officially started. Some say it began August 2nd, 1776, the day the Declaration was signed. I disagree. It's when we lost the war, because that's when we actually became recognized by everyone else as a country. So the transatlantic slave trade started in 1619 and lasted for 164 years before America existed. It lasted for 164 years before America actually became recognized. So America comes to exist, and there is still slavery in America. That's a fact. The transatlantic slave trade ends in 1807, but that's not when slavery ended. That's when the slave trade from Africa to America ended. It was 1807. The first noted in history kind of push or idea started to spread to end slavery started in 1804. That's when the first group started talking about ending slavery. That group would go on to become the Republican Party years and years later. But why did it take from 1783, when America became recognized as a country, until 1865, when slavery officially ended? That's about 80 years of slavery in America. 80 years slavery in America. Not 200, not 400. Slavery ended 164 years ago this year. America only had slavery for 80 years. That's it. Not 400. Stop blaming America for slavery. We didn't start slavery. We didn't even exist for most of it, and it ended less than 100 years after America came to exist. It would have been sooner, except the Democrats opposed ending it, and then went to war with us to keep us from freeing the slaves. So in order to end slavery, we had to form the Republican Party, elect Abraham Lincoln, pass the 13th Amendment to end the institution of what's called chattel slavery, the term used to describe the treatment of slaves as property in the United States. We actually had to do all of those and fight a war against the Democrats in order to end slavery in America. So the question becomes, and needs to be, was racism responsible for slavery? Because that's what we always hear about. We always hear about racism and slavery together. Did the Africans get enslaved by white people because they hated black people? No. Because there were black British citizens and black Brits in the British colonies, and they weren't hated. They did not have less rights. They were equals. In fact, the very first person to ever buy a slave in America was a black man. To top that off, the person credited as owning more slaves than any other individual in America was originally a British man who was also a black man. So Africans weren't enslaved out of hatred. Portugal and the British ships, and I know it's always the damn British, thank God for us getting to kick their butts in the Revolution, but Portuguese and British transatlantic ships, that's big, technologically modern, at the time, ships, technically modern enough to cross the entire freaking ocean, pull up to Africa. And these people have the classics of Shakespeare. They have blacksmithing. They have gold and silver coin money. They have written books. They have muskets. They have guns and steel chains, processed chemicals for the time, modern medicine, surgical procedures, jobs, wages, a governmental system in place in their society, and a postal system, a very new age modern clothing like undergarments and jackets, etc. And they find a primitive civilization living in huts, wearing like loincloths to cover their genitals if they wore anything at all. Many of them didn't. They have no written language. They have no books. They don't even know how to make paper. They have no types of surgical procedure. They have no classical writings, no government, simple hunter-gatherers, maybe a little bit of agriculture. But my understanding is there wasn't even widespread, heavy agriculture in Africa at that time. So what happened is a very advanced, technologically advanced society at the time came across a much more primitive one. That's what led to slavery. A technologically advanced society dominating a much more privileged, or a much more primitive society. Most slaves also weren't kidnapped. I know we all saw Roots when we were a kid. I remember seeing it. I enjoyed it. It was a great series. It was a great movie, especially the ending because it was a happy and good ending and slavery ended. We all loved it. Yes. But we all remember the beginning scene with Kunta Kinte being yanked off the beach with a rope around his neck and beaten. That's not accurate. That stuff did happen, but not in the beginning. That's not really how it started, and that wasn't even the majority of what happened. They were already slaves because these tribes in Africa would fight each other and conquer each other for territories and resources and enslave each other. So, and if you ever, there was a really, really good, it was about South America, not Africa, but it does a really good job. It was a movie that came out, I think it was Apocalypto, that displayed that really well. One tribe conquering and enslaving another one and torturing them and killing them, doing horrific things. But that's what happened. The first slaves that ever ended up on a ship and ever became a slave out of Africa, they were bought, not kidnapped. They were bought in the form of bartering, trading with other tribes. So the Portugal ship, the Portuguese ships and the British ships pulled up and they started trading goods and traded for people who were already slaves, Africans who were already slaves to other Africans. And even though my show is a political show, I don't like politicized sources. I want to throw that out there. To start, the best, to the best of my knowledge and the best of the information I can find on non-politicized sources, and I don't like politicized sources. I don't like biased sources. I like sources that are good at facts. I want facts, unbiased reality, objective fact. Whether they're inconvenient to what I hope and wish they are, or they hurt my side, or they're not really what I want them to be. I want unbiased fact. When the stories are facts and the article is true and correct, I'm going to share it because you deserve truth and fact. And that's the only thing that I put up on the Americanist Radio page is I try to only put up what I believe and know to be truth and fact. I don't put up anything that I think is too biased or too politicized or maybe inaccurate. If I think it's inaccurate, I'll omit it. There's things I just won't share. I just won't put up there, but there's nothing that I'm ever going to put up there that I believe is false or I know to be false, no matter what it does to my side. You guys deserve truth and fact in everything that you choose to follow, and media-wise and radio-wise and news-wise. And that's what I'm always going to try to bring you. So everything that I can find, and the reason I brought that up is everything I can find from these, a non-politicized source I've seen tells me that I'm correct the first slaves out of Africa were bought, not kidnapped. But I want truth and fact in reporting, and I want truth and fact in news, and that's where I want the Americanist radio page to go, and that's where I want the Real Americanist show to go. It's what I want for Americanist radio. I want a whole network. I want this show to have other people doing shows. I want them writing columns. I want them writing articles. I want its own news network. I want its own news website, its own journalists, its own investigative reporters, its own TV channel. I want a whole new news and media company that really is focused on fact and truth, and that's where I want this to go, and that's why I'm doing it. And America deserves it. Everybody listening deserves it. That's really what news needs to be. And now, back to what we were talking about, most slaves were already enslaved and we purchased them. And I'm not saying that makes what happened okay. I'm not saying that makes it right or acceptable or any less horrific. But the myth and fact that, racist, hate-filled American white males kidnapped all these Africans because we hate them and enslaved them, and because he hates them and enslaved them, and then kept them enslaved for 400 years in America, it's just not true. It's just not true. It's fake. It's false. It's a lie. It's literally a horrific situation that is being exploited and used by the left to push the racism against white people, sexism against white males, especially that's, what do they call them? Cisgender. What do the left call, normal people, normal white guys? Cis white gender males, or Nazis, whatever they call them. So I want to be clear that I'm in no way, nor will I ever downplay slavery or saying it wasn't that bad or wasn't horrific and awful and that horrible things didn't happen. I'm not saying any of that in the slightest, but what I am saying is if we're going to have the discussion and we're going to make that the subject of a modern-day political issue, I want the discussion based on fact and truth. I don't want myths. I don't want lies. I don't want political bias. I want truth. In fact, that's going to be the new slogan of Americanist Radio. Fact and truth for America. That is the new slogan of the show. That's going to be the new slogan of the webpage, and I already love it. It's fact and truth for America. Another thing that we've been talking about in the news is Beto O'Rourke has announced his 2020 run for the presidency this past Wednesday morning. Robert O'Rourke, Beto, as in Beto male, is running for president. The guy who lied about being Mexican and tried to join the Mexican caucus, that guy, is running as a Democrat in 2020. And after all of his endorsing socialism and all the comments he's made, he is a socialist. He had the gall, he had the nads to claim that day, on Wednesday, that he is a capitalist. Remember, he's running as a Democrat, which is the anti-capitalist party, and right now a stone-cold socialist party. But he actually claimed he is a capitalist, yet the history of all his comments, his voting history, say otherwise big time. Something you may not have known about our friend Beto Male O'Rourke. We have like AOC, our favorite socialist that we call our favorite misfiring brain cell. We're going to call O'Rourke Beto Male Rourke. That's what we're going to call him, Beto Male. In 1995, he caught himself an arrest for burglary. One of the 2020 candidates, they're up to like 26 now, they flamed the Republicans in the last election cycle for having in the very beginning of the campaign season, there was like 13 or 14 or 15 candidates for the Republican Party. And they flamed us for it because they ran two old rich white people, Hillary and Uncle Bernie. And now they're up to legitimately 26 people have announced the bid for the 2020 Democrat candidacy. They've announced their candidacy for the Democrat nomination. Anyway, Beto Male was arrested in 1995 for burglary. 3 years later, in 1998, he was arrested for drunk driving, causing a horrific car crash. We posted this last week. We posted the photos of a horrific car crash and then fleeing from the scene to elude police. And he was arrested and charged for that. Now, all that's pretty bad. Beto had a pretty wild 90s. This was all in the 90s. This was just up 1990 through 98. He had a wild 90s. But in 2006, he caught himself an ethics violation for an eminent domain